Back?
Oh, they're in the back now. Oh, okay.
Hello?
Okay. So where should I sit in the judge?
Yes, doesn't matter.
Everyone, we'd like to kick off our next event where a panel discussion where we talk about how we take MVPs into actual AI implementations. For that, I would like to welcome Anil Boinapalli, the CEO of Sky Solutions, who will be the moderator of this event. Anil, please.
First, thank you, Ravi. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to moderate MVP to agency adoption of AI. First, I would like to welcome the panelists. To start with, Chris Alvares from USDA. Chris is USDA Chief Data and AI Leader. Please, Chris, have a seat. Next, I would like to invite Omar, Bouaichi, Director, Emerging Technologies, U.S. Department of HUD. And then, next, I would like to invite Yemi, who is the Chief Technologist at CapGemini Government Services. It's going to be exciting. First, I will set the context, what it is and what are we trying to go over next 45 minutes. Specifically, there's a lot of excitement around creating pilots, MVPs in AI within the federal government, within the commercial sector, specifically within our company as well. But how those pilots, MVPs are bringing ROIs and how they are going to be useful and how agencies are adopting. So that's what we are going to be going through, and we'll have some specific questions about it, but then we'll also have the audience can ask some questions as well. So first, I'll start with Chris. At what point does an MVP or a pilot is ready for an agency adoption? And what are you seeing how your agency is looking into that?
Yeah, great question. I think for us, a lot of our AI work starts with an MVP or a pilot. We're very focused on let's get some experience, let's see if this works in our hands. Does it work for the use case that we have? And so we end up with a lot of MVPs, a lot of prototypes within our organization that we're trying to decide what do we move forward, what do we scale and move to production. I think a couple of factors can weigh into that. One is, how does the MVP perform? Does it meet expectations? Is it better than what we're doing today? We've got examples where we've asked students in hackathons to rebuild something using LLMs that we have in place, and we can see the better performance. And it gives us confidence that this can, with further development, be an even better solution for USDA. I think there's also the need to look at, and we heard a little bit of this morning, the security aspects to it. So how do you take something and put it into a production environment where you've got that security in place, you've got that level of accuracy and trust and performance that you're looking for. I think it's an iterative process, but there's a lot that you need to do to be able to get from an MVP to production. But I would just say a lot of what we're evaluating is how does this MVP perform? Do we think that further investment is worth it? And the prototypes have been really key in helping senior leadership decide what's worth investing in and what isn't.
I may jump the gun. Omar, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself before answering the question?
Can you guys hear me?
Good morning. My name is Omar Bouaichi. I manage the Innovation Lab and Emerging Technology for GenMate. As I said earlier, GenMate is a corporation owned by HUD. In terms of how we produce an MVP, it starts with the ideation. So we have an idea, and then we go after the idea, we document the idea, we ensure we have sponsorship. So the sponsorship is very important for us, because that's the business commitment to conduct a series of meeting with us to secure some high-level requirement. And then it proceeds from ideation to the proof of concept, or proof of technology, or proof of value. Now, my CIO will tell me, we want a proof of value. That means I need to know the saving that we're gonna introduce to Jenny May. Or if it's technology, we purely focus on the technology performance. If the concept, then we need to know exactly what is the pain point we're trying to address. So once we have a successful POC, or POV or POT, it goes to the next stage. That's gonna warrant, as Chris said, more funding, more obligation from Jenny May to ensure that we have ample funding to bring in partners, vendors who work with us. That's, for us, we have a couple of vendors we work with, and we start really working on the prototype or pilot. A prototype or pilot for us, maybe is the same, depends on the data. If it's maybe doesn't cover all the functionality, we call it a prototype. Not a lot of data there, but if it's data and we need to present it to the ATO process to be productionalized, then it's a pilot. And we have real data, not just synthetic data. It goes through rigor in terms of testing, in terms of the IBNB, which we conduct all the time in our application. So the independent verification and validation needs to give us a clean report before we go MVP. Now, to the MVP question, we need to make sure we have a plan to care for the MVP, because it does not cover everything. And we need to remind the business that was the agreement. And we start putting a roadmap to show how we're gonna progress with the MVP to become a full solution for our business group. So for us, this journey, we have done it a couple of times, in low code, no code, in some even COTS application we built, but we follow Agile, we follow a good collaboration with the business, we bring our partners, and we control and monitor the funding consumption, our burn rates. So this exercise, that's what I do at the lab, and it's been very successful for Jenny May to start doing it instead of just going all the way or putting an RFP out there and asking vendor to come and produce the solution. So that's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Yemi, you want to quickly introduce yourself and add if you want to add?
Absolutely. Yemi Oshinnaiye, was at USDA for a while, just left TSA now with CapGemini Government Solutions. I will tell you what I will add to the conversation here is prototyping. You talked about POCs and prototyping. That was always a great part of this, even from government up until now, is to be able to risk manage. So, when you ask yourself a question, is MongoDB or Postgres best for my application? Sometimes you actually have to prototype and see if it'll break it. And those prototypes give you feedback so you know how to build that MVP. Another example is, does the user experience and design pattern help the customer better? Those answers come from doing quick prototypes. When you do those prototypes and you take the feedback, it actually helps you build out that MVP. So now you have empirical data to say, I can use these patterns and use these products to help build something out. And in my experience, it's getting to that MVP. It's great to say, but what's minimum viable? A customer wants everything up front all the time. Sometimes you have to help them say, this minimal viable product is so you can start, and then the information that we get from the feedback helps us to get to adoption. And making the customer and the product owner part of that evolution actually helps with adoption, because they're saying, I saw from your prototypes, I saw from your proof of concept, you helped me understand what I thought I wanted, and now I know what I want from empirical data. So now I can help validate the MVP, and then they're actually adopting as we go. So it's a great process. It's also embedded in Agile.
And I just want to add one thing. My CIO told me, like, when we start prototyping, and we started in 2019, that you cannot do the Wild West. You have to have a controlled process to do prototyping and POC, POV or POT. So we introduced a methodology called the 5Ds. So we start with the discovery, and then we define, and then we develop, and we demonstrate, and then we push for a decision. So this methodology that we invented at our lab put the right control, but the time between each step It's very short. We do a discovery, it's 2 days, it's 1 week, but definitely we need to have this kind of control to ensure we don't have, a messy POC. So thanks, Anil.
Thank you. I mean, I heard a lot of data, right? All of you have touched upon. So Chris, I'll start with you being the Chief Data Officer at USDA. Data is pivotal to make anything happen with AI. So how do you make sure that data is ready for AI and what agency is doing to be able to have that going forward?
It's a tough, I feel like it's a tough question to say, when is all your data ready for AI? One, I think it depends on the use case. So, for one AI use case, the data might be ready. For another one that's maybe more sophisticated or more technical in some aspect, maybe the data is not ready. A lot of it has to do with how well is your data described, how easy is it to understand. If you're just giving information to LLMs to figure out. I think there's a lot that's still, different ways that you can do that. One way, for example, that we've worked on an LLM-based help desk support agent to help our employees get IT issues resolved. And one of the things we learned in that process was some of our knowledge information had some sensitive data in there that we didn't want the LLMs to be able to, or users of the LLMs to be able to discover. So we had to clean up some of our knowledge articles. We also realized some of the content wasn't on the knowledge articles themselves, but still in our help desk agents, heads of folks that were doing the desk support. So that's one way we've seen where the data is, there are ways we could improve the data for that kind of solution. Other ways are really just about maybe training data. We did a project about a year and a half ago that was really successful. We were using some training data, building a computer vision model. It was really looked really the business side was really happy with the outputs of it. And another example where they decided to move that from prototype into production. They wanted to do the same thing with basically another use case, same model, computer vision, classification. Problem was they didn't have any training data for that case. And so now they're back collecting data, labeling it. It can span a whole lot of different areas. Do you have enough data? Is it well described? Is it fit for the purpose for that AI? Is it comprehensive or complete? I think all of those feed into data readiness.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And Omar, if you could elaborate on structured versus unstructured data, as well as synthetic data. How much data is available to someone to come in and build these models and AI applications?
No, I agree with Chris in terms of the data. It will never be ready, and for sure it will not be ready if you don't have a good data governance program, if you don't have a data quality program, if you don't have all the validation, if you don't have proper stewardship of data. So all this will, lend toward a very good and robust data program. And if you have problem now with data, wait till you use AI. Because with AI, and when you start augmenting your LLM with unstructured data, which is for some government agency, it's like a black box. It's out there, but it's not really, the insight is not being derived from the unstructured data. So for us, we are hoping that we can go and start looking things now and fix what needs to be fixed. Because once we start bringing this Gen AI and this, large language models or small language models, I think it's going to amplify the problems of our data. It's going to show us exactly what's wrong, and we might not even be able to correct it, and it will be too late. So we are hoping to rectify this, and we're looking at our unstructured data, trying to manage it properly. So that's one of the things. And most important for us is the education we need to conduct within our agency regarding the hyperscaler and those LLM vendors. We know all of them, we work with all of them, we know the pros and cons of each one of them, and because we work in the financial sector, so our decision is very critical, and it can impact a lot of things we do in terms of the health of the mortgage industry. We play a role there, So for us, everything, we need to have controlled outcome, because AI is all about outcome. If you cannot control the outcome, if you're not sure about it, then this is a big risk for us. And in addition, we need to bring the cyber security focus to it, and the performance of this AI implementation is also needs to be assessed. And that's what the lab does. As I said earlier, safe zone, we look at how the AI behavior, what's the control we need to do, what's the AI governance we need to do. So these are things we're working on.
So that is maybe a segue to you, Yemi. I think Omar has touched upon how important the security is. So how agency and the industry should be prepared when they should be thinking about security while building the MVP so that it can be easily adopted and ATO'd and FedRAMP. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you want to think about security when you think about the idea. And when the concept comes to play, compliance, the ATO is really the end of the road. Compliance has to be thought about when you think about design. So when you think about a problem you want to solve, the first question is, for a lot of agencies, is it FedRAMP, and do I need to be FedRAMP? And the question is, do I have a compliance or a governance layer that is my table stakes? And should that product already meet certain standards? And as you build it, here's where the prototyping and the concept comes into play. How do I get that AI product to meet my compliance? Because when it comes to data, it's about availability and access, and how much data do I need to access? Should someone see the product that comes out of that? So you really want every step of the way to be about cyber and compliance, and you also want to make sure outside of compliance that you want to test the security. Sometimes you test the security at the first layer of the solution, and then you build on top of it, and you've left a hole in the middle. So you need each and every time you're testing to have a security test along with that. So to be honest, security is at every layer and every point. In all my different jobs, we like to have a security engineer paired with a developer, paired with a tester, so that each and every time you'll see things and talk about things that you may not have thought about. Hardening a device to use AI is just as important as the solution that's going to be deployed.
Absolutely. So Omar, I'm sure you have come across different things in implementing security as well. So what, do you want to add what Yemi has said, what are the other things and roles and responsibilities between the security engineers and, AI implementations and stakeholders?
Yeah, my role is not the implementation of security or cyber security. It's advocating for the MVP to pass security. So my role is to be with the developers, to be with the business in terms of seeing what risk needs to be mitigated. We have a CISO that sits with his team, vet the ATO to the question of does it have to be FedRAMP and GovCloud? Yes, of course. That's the first question. I mean, we cannot entertain anything in commercial cloud. It has to be FedRAMP, GovCloud. But my role is to make sure that the security question the CISO raised are addressed properly by the application, by the MVP. So we go through this rigor with the CISO, and before he gives his ATO, there is all this security control we need to pass. And we're always hoping that the vendor that comes in have the security controls in place, or the majority of them, because we cannot start from zero. It will never reach an ATO in due time. So these are important questions in terms of the security implication. The only thing I do sometimes is in the POC, I don't impose a lot of security requirements on the POC because I don't want to delay it. So there is sometimes I had the chance to use commercial cloud to bring the proof of concept to show to the business the concept we are after. And then it moves to the GovCloud and the FedRAMP requirements. So.
Okay. That could be a segue to, we talked about security, we talked about data, we talked about identifying the use cases from inception to elaboration and so on and so forth. But it all requires a governance, right? So without a governance, it's hard to be able to implement the best practices and broad adoption. So Chris, how USDA is looking into, and what, from your personal experience, what type of governance frameworks that are available, how industry and the agencies look at implementing those governance frameworks in implementation of AI?
Another tough question. I think we're actually talking about this right now in terms of our current governance processes around AI, what's working, what isn't, what needs to be changed. I think one of the things that's front of our mind is that we want to enable rapid adoption. It's a priority of the administration. It's a priority of our agency as well. We want to be able to move fast and do that as accurately and appropriately as possible. At the same time, we want to make sure that we have visibility into what's happening across the organization, who's building AI tools, what are they building them for. In some cases, those might be high impact, and we really need to be able to document what steps we've taken to ensure that we're building a robust solution that's performing the way we would expect. So we're looking at governance in terms of what do we need to assess differently when it's software that's introducing AI? What do we need to review when it's a development project within our organization? Are there things that we can just say, if you're using an already approved platform within USDA and you're doing a use case that is been previously approved, or maybe that's not a high impact, that doesn't need to go through a complicated governance process. But if it's something new, if it's like now we have to bring in a new platform based on the use case, there we might need to take extra steps to review. So we're trying to find a balance between making things easy to navigate, but having the right checkpoints where we need them. I think maybe the last thing I'll share is that one of the things that I see as advantageous with governance is that for us, governance at the department level gives us visibility across a pretty big and multi-headed organization. We have 18 component agencies that all tend to work on their mission space areas. We have the ability to see commonalities across the agencies where we can pool resources, where we can bring people together on shared problems. That's something that's enabled by governance at the top level, and I think that's a value that a governance process brings to an organization like USDA.
Yeah, Yemi, if you could add, how, as part of the governance, you worked at USDA, PSA. How have you dealt with fairness, hallucination? These are the things that everyone's mind. How that you have dealt with, how you're thinking. What are some things that you could provide to industry and the agencies?
Yeah, the first thing, whenever we had an opportunity to build out governance, is we looked at governance as not just the guardrail, but the third rail also, because it'll propel your idea and help folks learn how to use it. So it's making sure that everyone that had a representation in the agency or agencies were a part of building up governance. It was making sure that when we put up guardrails, those guardrails were such that we kept things in line with the purpose, and then making sure that there was a lot of education so folks knew what to do and how to do with it. Because if you have guardrails and no one's using it, then the guardrails are useless. We also built harmony around organizations. So in each of the areas that I'm in, we always had a group that got together and talked about governance and talked about what we're doing. So you're continuously evaluating governance and continuously improving governance, because it's not a one-time thing. Governance is a living attribute. You always have a living document to make sure that if something isn't working and there's a disagreement, we can update that, making people feel empowered that they can work with it. And kind of like Chris said, governance is all about visibility. So if you have agents or representatives, parts of the governance team, they're making sure you see everything so that you know how governance can be implemented and be effective.
Yeah, Omar, if you could, how governance can enable innovation rather than stopping, us to move forward, how governance can be used to be able to have these AI applications to be adopted in real world.
Yeah, I mean, governance can stifle innovation if it's not done properly. So we did see that. So we came up with some concept called light governance. So it's, we still need governance, but it cannot be that same rigor when it goes to an ATO process. So that's something we're enhancing and improving. But for us, in terms of AI governance and IT governance, and I know we discussed it, I mean, there is intersection between the two. I think AI governance is different. and AI governance needs to add value to that process. It cannot just be a control mechanism, it cannot stifle, and it cannot stop people from using it and enhancing the productivity of the agency. So that's the debate we have. I mean, there are folks that have the right to impose rigid governance because they are accountable. And there is folks that likes to see improvement, to see adoption of this nice tool that enhance and can contribute in our decision making. So, but the more I see the AI implementation and the use case that we are assessing, the more, concern I have is like, how do we control it? I mean, when we did the predictive analytics, we can really understand the outcome based on the score. I mean, the engine gives you a score, and we say, yep, that's a good prediction, or it's a fair prediction. With this type of AI technologies, Gen AI, it's very difficult because you only manage the outcome, and it can vary based on the models teaching and all that. So I think for me this is a big action that we need to take in terms of AI governance, the control mechanism, the management of outcome, and the most concerning for me is the loss of control. We always used to know what's happening with our systems. I mean, I did implementation of ERP all over the place, even globally, and I did the PeopleSoft and the Oracle and the SAP. We know exactly what's happening from the beginning of the data all the way to producing the report. We know what's happened to it, what kind of validation, what kind of enrichment. With this type of technology on the AI front, it's very hard. It's very hard to manage.
We all agree, there are hard to manage, so there are some operational constraints that do exist while implementing the AI. So Chris, with that, what are the operational constraints that you are seeing to be able to scale, MVPs, pilots to real adoption, to be able to use by all the stakeholders?
I think some of the constraints we run into are really just understanding how best to build and deploy some of these tools. We talk about AI as sort of one entity, but it's so many different, it's taking on so many different forms right now that there's a lot more complexity to it than it seems when you dig under the hood. We've touched a little bit on things like security and governance and hallucinations. I think one of the things that's really front and center in my mind is ultimately how well are these, particularly Gen AI, these LLM-based tools, how well are they performing? Just to think a little bit about impacts to folks that use USDA programs. If someone comes and asks an LLM about a USDA program that they might be eligible for, if it tells them yes when they're not, that puts that person at risk of maybe improper benefits of programs, fraud, waste, and abuse, for example, but due to being misinformed by an LLM. On the other hand, if that person is told they're not eligible when they are, they're missing out on benefits. So from my perspective, performance is really important. We are starting to build, as part of our development cycle, we're doing two things that I think try to address that. One is this idea of AI red teaming. So we've recruited folks within USDA. When we're building a product that's LLM based, there's a point in that process where we ask some folks, hey, do what you can to break this tool and see what we discover. And I think we've been successful, but at the same time, successful in ways that allow us to really understand how much risk are we taking on, can we accept that, or the things we can do to mitigate those risks. Sometimes we can't, and we're willing to go forward with that. The other thing that we're doing that I'm really advocating for within our development process is something called benchmarking. So, guardrails are really important, but they may not necessarily ensure that a correct answer is given if someone's asking about a food safety question, what temperature to cook turkey at for Thanksgiving. So we're working on kind of what are some questions that we can, like a panel of questions that we can ask an LLM, answers that we expect back, and we score some of our tools on how well they respond and how consistent they are with the expected answers. And so benchmarking and red teaming are helping us kind of really address what I think is a constraint, which is how much trust can we put in the tools that we're building?
Wow. I mean, that, Yemi, if you could tell us, like, what are the tool acquisition or testing and other operational constraints that may exist in, building AI application and adopting AI applications?
I think, to start with, there is a security constraint. So some of the AI tools and products right now aren't always, because they're so new to FedRAMP, they're not always in GovCloud and ready for organizations. There's also a use case constraint. Sometimes a use case comes up and there isn't one tool or platform that can solve it, and we're having to integrate multiple platforms in there. And then there's, to be quite honest, availability. There was a time early in government when Gen AI came out that everybody was using it at home. We wanted to use it at work, and there were no guardrails. So there was a performance constraint having individuals use those tools for work in the government. So, we had to have governance there. I mean, it's very similar to building apps. There was a time where only companies could build apps. And then we had platforms and SaaS, and then really smart teenagers to build apps. And then you take natural language to build an app and automation. Now just really aware teenagers can build apps. So I think the constraint becomes our ability to have a platform to give to folks. And then, quite frankly, I think the government has a challenge with wanting to build its own LLM, just from the straight compute power, the straight analysis power, and also as the concept of LLM evolves into SLM, LLM, where do you build out these? Am I using Hugging Face? Am I using something else? It becomes complex to choose. And so those constraints always flow to acquisition because you don't know what to buy or how to buy it, or how to describe it in the solicitation and where I get it from. So we're needing to organize around what is the best thing for the government, kind of as a whole. And that's why you see GSA doing what they're doing now, because that becomes a constraint for each agency to try to execute because it's too complex.
Wow. So I know, there are many teams that have come in and, they've put in a lot of effort and, this is how they wanted to engage with the government. So my next question is, how do you see this working? ACT-IAC is doing, maybe they are thinking of doing it again and again. How do you see this working? What are your thoughts? How frequently that, it would help to be able to do so that industry and the government can work and collaborate to get something out of it? Omar, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think with the ACT-IAC and the AI working group that we have, been involved with, Paul and Opa, Gabrielle, and the industry led by Ravi and B. So I think for us, we are really trying to do is coordinate some kind of, networking and introducing applications to the government agencies, especially if they are relevant. So for me, it's all about relevancy. If the use case is relevant to HUD, I will definitely showcase it if I can see the value and if there is a pain point they are addressing. So that's one. But I do want to bring to the folks doing the use cases, they have to be very comprehensible of the landscape we have. For us with the ATO that established the boundary, your solution cannot just come and be planted. There is this process, and some of our systems are old. So for us, that's the challenge they have. We need to make them aware of. So they cannot, just bring a solution. We're using it, using like type of ChatGPT or any other hyperscaler that just does prompting. I think for me right now, a lot of governments are using it, and GSA is spearheading this, and we are piggybacking on those licenses, and some are paying tokens. What we're really looking for is AI that's embedded within our solution to help the insight, to help the workload, to help the classification of the documentation, the tagging of documentation, deriving insight from and looking at the risk. We have some NLG, natural language generation solution that I have implemented within GenMake. We're trying to see, can AI give us better insight than this deterministic solution we have implemented? So I think for us, it's not going to be easy for newcomers to the government. There is this process of procurement that they have to understand, and then the use case needs to address a pain point that saves money or save time for the government. And it will be on us to see if we can give a chance to these groups to be introduced and get a chance to introduce their capabilities. I do that all the time, by the way, so if there is, in the securitization space, in the mortgage, fraud detection, things like that, that is relevant to the housing, I'm happy to be your contacts, and I'm happy to look for pain points within HUD, within Jenny May, and make the introduction. But be aware that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be process driven, and it's going to be a lot of vetting. So hope this helps.
Thank you, Omar. Chris, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think hackathons like what ACT-IAC is sponsoring today are really valuable activities. We are leaning into that at USDA. Just at the end of January, we published our AI strategy on our website. One of the focus areas there is university partnerships, and you'll hear references in our strategy to hackathons. For us, it's that rapid prototyping. It's getting a lot of different versions of some solution to a problem really quickly. It's helped us pick the best of all the MVPs. So going around today, you may see you like something that this group has done, you might really like something else that this other group has done. Being able to pull those together, I think, helps agencies really figure out their requirements in some ways and and what they want to build. I'd also add that from maybe a private sector perspective, I've been in some of these events where it's not just government and universities involved in a hackathon, but private sector companies are there posing their own challenges to students. I've seen job offers on the spots, like we want students to come in and finish building this for us. So I think it can help companies either like expand their platforms or expand their service offerings. But at USDA, it's really helping us see what we can do to solve a problem or a challenge really quickly, and getting multiple points of view all at once instead of sort of just buying one solution from one source.
Chris, great insight. With that, we will open to audience for 1 or 2 questions.
Question is with Omar. You in the last said you implemented a deterministic solution using AI. Can you little bit elaborate on that?
I used the NLG solution, natural language generation solution, to implement a process that does the assessment of our credit evaluation. And we use deterministic, that there is no learning. It's an engine. It's a logic engine. The name of the one that we started with called Narrative Science. Now it's owned by Salesforce. But for me, deterministic outcome, it's very controlled. So the NLG, I know exactly what I'm producing. I will calibrate the narratives, and I can test. In AI, there is no testing in AI. It's like, what are we testing? Because I asked this question. You get a valid test today, tomorrow you'll get something completely different. We cannot use this in the financial sector because we need to know the outcome and to be 100%. Now, the way we're using Gen AI, it's, you do a question, you can ask for a memo redaction, it will give it to you, but it's on you to make the correction. Where the solution that we have put in production, and this is ATO already, it's out there. It produced those documentation, and our analysts, instead of start typing the narrative, it gets generated with the right chart. It's already documented, and the only thing to do is QA and see the anomalies. So we save a lot of time doing that. So hope that helps. Yeah. And that's the proof of concept my management wants me to do. Look at the deterministic, bring the probabilistic, and see what's different. So I'm not looking forward to that because it's going to be like I'm going to be in the middle of it for a few months. So, but thanks for the question.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your time to explain a lot of details. I have a question regarding the government data sharing, AI tool usage, etc. As you mentioned about the data governance. You try to set up a benchmark, and you talk about the data readiness, right? For each of the government agencies, we probably want to share data, and sometimes the data shared among outside of the certain departments. So at what point do you think at the departmental level, all of the agencies should collaborate and set up and talk about the benchmarking on data governance? And at what point do you think we should validate the data to ensure the data is ready for further analysis based on whatever the business needs?
Thanks for that. I think, at what point do we need to start that journey? I think it was yesterday. There's a lot that needs to be done. You talked about data sharing between federal agencies. That definitely happens. We need to set up agreements. We need to set up MOUs in order to share that data, but it's critical. I mean, we bring in, with USDA, we bring in data from GSA on properties. We bring in data from Treasury on USA spending and other sources. And so we need some of that data to help us build some of the tools and leverage AI in some of the ways that we want to be able to do it. But I do think there's some challenges still. We have a lot of data silos, and we're working to break some of that down. Within USDA, and I think with every federal agency, there are executive orders that are out there now about breaking down barriers to access to information. And so we're looking at ways to make data more accessible across the organization. That can create a risk when you're talking about, now let's layer artificial intelligence over that. I know there's a common phrase out there that, you know, AI only has access to the data you already have access to. That may be true, but people, like employees, also probably have access to too much information. And that's not necessarily like an acceptable level of data access. So things like data labeling, we're implementing document sensitivity labels, a number of other things to ensure that even though we are making data more accessible, we also need to have the right levels of access to that data where appropriate.
Thank you.
And just
Go
real
ahead.
quick, I'd say that there are sharing agreements that exist today, and I think AI or the logic that we use in AI shouldn't be the catalyst for data sharing. The thing that AI does is it makes it more powerful and easier to get data that may not be initially searched. So inference is a powerful tool. So if you have two agencies that already have data sharing, and you want a third agency data and you're using AI, and there's inference in that AI model, you can derive that data. So when you know the use cases exist, and when you understand that aggregated data may be a process, then that's when you should start data sharing, so that we know that we can actually guard against it or be ready for it. So I think that's one of the things that AI does, is it's so much faster to get data that isn't part of the main collection or the existing sharing agreement, that we need to get ahead of that. And then, I agree that there's so many data silos, and sometimes there's a reason there's a data silo. We need to figure out as agencies how we get beyond that.
No, I agree. I think sharing data between government agency adhere to an MOU. So there is this agreement between agency, and it gets shared through our data program. So the VP of data is the only person that can certify and share data. We do have some data sets out there. So data.gov, I believe it's still there. I don't know how well it's maintained. And Ginnie Mae has a requirement by law to disclose data. So we have a data disclosure that push data out there for our investors to take a look at loan and pool data. So it's out there. So when a developer or when somebody wants to demo a solution for us and they ask me for data, I cannot provide it. I mean, I will ask them to create synthetic data, fictitious data, but it has to be relevant. So that's the big challenge, and that's a good question, because for me, the vendor needs to know exactly the business case they're trying to solve for, and create data that has some relevancy. And I know it's difficult, but it's a constraint we have right now.
I think we are at time. Thank you to our panelists for sharing the real world insights, adopting MVPs in agencies. And thank you to everyone who joined us today here and virtually as well. But before we close, I would like to ask everyone to join me in giving a big round of applause to our panelists for sharing their time, insights, and their experience implementing AI. With that, thank you all.